Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shells, dust, light sergeants, peasants, vassals. Let me be Syrian for a moment. I'm a useful idiot, and today I would like to talk about Syria. And it looks like intervention is imminent. And we've seen intervention look like it was on the table quite a few times over the last year, but this really looks like it now. The saber rattling has reached fever pitch, and we have all the logistics handled. There are 17 U.S. warships off the coast of Syria. We have U.S. troops in Lebanon. We have U.S. troops in Israel. We have U.S. troops in Jordan. We have U.S. troops moving from Kuwait to the Iraqi-Syrian border. So everything is falling into place. And they're now using the chemical weapons, the old chestnut from the Iraq War, as a pretense for intervention. And this is interesting for a number of reasons. One, it gives us a heads up. So we can look for a chemical weapons attack because they're letting us know that's what's going to happen. But it's not going to be the Assad regime that uses them. It will be the opposition that we support. But they won't tell us that part. And much like all the massacres and the atrocities that have been happening in this so-called civil war, they are not perpetrated by the Assad regime. They are perpetrated by the opposition that the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia is supporting and arming. And I want to say, too, that I have no love for Assad or the Assad regime, and but I will say that it's hard to blame his government for putting down this insurrection so mercilessly, because that's what any state does. It's not necessarily Syria or Assad. It's the state defending itself, and that's what states do. I can guarantee that in the United States or the Eurozone, if there was an armed insurrection, particularly if that armed insurrection was instigated and armed by foreign powers, the U.S. or the Eurozone governments would put it down almost equally as brutally, if not more so. So let's skip that issue. And but speaking of massacres and atrocities, let me say I've seen a plethora of videos of Syrian violence, and particularly the violence of the freedom fighters, the so-called freedom fighters that the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Israel are supporting in Syria. And the brutality is shocking, to say the very least. And my heart goes out to the Syrian population, which this horrible violence is being unleashed on. And that brings up my other point. And of course, calling the situation in Syria as a civil war is rather dubious. There's so many foreign influences and so much influx from all over that region that to call it a civil war is really misleading at best. We have elements of Hezbollah, Hamas, we have Al-Qaeda, we have Libyan fighters, we have Afghanistan fighters, we have the actual Syrian opposition, and we have all these disparate Syrian opposition groups, because of course they're all going to fight for power as well, as that's what they're all interested in. So let's not forget that these people are like people all over the world, and there will be different power struggles to fill this vacuum, and their own personal agendas. So so this is the situation in Syria right now. There will be an intervention. It will be a matter of days or weeks at best, it looks like now. And everything I've heard sounds like it's going to be much like Libya, in the sense that there will not be any UN approval. It will be done with NATO, and there will be no boots on the ground, or so they say. Of course, there were boots on the ground. They were just mercenaries and special operations in Libya, because the rebels couldn't have done it on their own. And we're finding that same situation in Syria. And I think that's why the ante is being upped now, because the opposition insurrection has faltered. And the U.S. can't afford to let this opportunity go by. There will be regime change. Assad will be removed. So everything will be set so that the opposition and this insurrection succeeds one way or another. And so it looks like they're going to supply air support and sea support and logistics, special operations, trainings, and more arms. And don't anybody kid themselves. They talk about, well, we're going to start selling them arms, but everybody's already been lined up selling and giving arms to the opposition in Syria. And that includes Israel, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. And of course, the Free Syrian Army has been training and going in and out of Syria from Turkey for quite some time now, which is a pretty provocative act in itself. So anyway, there we have it. And how do we get to this point? What's led up to this so far? Well, of course, Syria is part of the so-called Arab Spring, and we now know, looking at all the evidence, that the Arab Spring is essentially a grassroots movement that was organized by Western influences and Western institutions, including the CIA, and that this grassroots movement was harnessed, and then through the advances in social media, it was easy to coordinate it and instigate these manufactured revolutions all throughout the Middle East. And they each have a little different character and a little different makeup and a little different scenario, because each individual country has its own profile. And Syria, of course, was an interesting case. Much like with Libya, we had a family in power, one man in power for 40 years. And kind of interesting how Assad had been in power for 40 years in Syria, and now all of a sudden it's imperative that he be removed right now. So people should think about that as well. The man has been in power for 40 years, and now all of a sudden he has to go, and he's the most brutal dictator on the planet Earth. So that's pretty interesting in itself. But and then these chemical weapons. That brings up another interesting point too, which is what happens to those chemical weapons? So since we're supporting Al-Qaeda terrorist elements and as part of the opposition in Syria, are these chemical weapons going to fall into their hands? Are we going to see them show up somewhere else on this planet after this intervention? And what kind of government are we going to end up with in Syria? I assume it'll probably be much the same as we're seeing in all the other Arab Spring countries. They're going to have a Muslim, Islamic oriented government, and it will be a lot more radical than probably the Assad regime, and that'll be interesting to see. But no doubt it will be another vassal state and a puppet government. But more importantly, we have a grand chessboard being played out here, and the whole idea of this foreign policy, and particularly this whole Wesley Clark list of regime change, is to finally remove all the volatility that we have gotten from this regime once and for all, because the United States and Israel have bigger fish to fry, and of course with the United States it's our ultimate surrounding and showdown with China and Russia, so America can dominate the world. And so this is part of that game plan. So they're going to isolate Hezbollah and Hamas and remove these rogue states like Syria and Iran. And they all hinge together because, of course, Syria and Iran are allies. Syria and Iran are arming and supporting Hezbollah and Hamas. And so when you deal with one of them, you're going to deal with all of them. And that's the ultimate goal of this game plan. So here we have it. Syrian intervention. It is upon us now, and it will only be a matter of days and or weeks. So enjoy our new war, everyone. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.